On today's show, the second half of the season is officially a go, and I'm telling you, my lovely, bubbly listeners, what to keep an eye on the most in regards to the Padres in the second half and beyond. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Friday, July 18th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering the team for almost 6 years now, not just for this podcast, though, but various other outlets, including JustBaseball.com, chief among them. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by our good friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Be sure to go check that out, and be sure to go check me out on the socials, Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Reach out on there with any questions, comments, or concerns you might have, because today's episode, I imagine you guys are going to want to keep talking. We've been doing recaps, sort of, all-star break episodes all week. We're finally getting back to some game action tonight against the Nationals, so that should be a lot of fun. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is the biggest things to keep an eye on for the second half of the 2025 season for the Padres. And there's so much to talk about with this team. And that's because there's always so much to talk about with this team, because this is a team that is never boring. This is a team that continues to elicit storylines at every conceivable point in the season, frankly, and every single conceivable opportunity that they have, they will make the news. And a big part of that is going to be the trade deadline, which we are going to be approaching soon. Right? Like, this is really, sneaking up on us, I think, in a lot of ways, the trade deadline this year. And it's going to be a day after my birthday, which is wild. And where the Padres are right now is absolutely a team that is probably going to buy. This is a team that's going to be aggressive, but the only question is to what extent, right? So that's the general thing. But let's begin, right? I have a bunch of different things I want to talk about. The first thing, speaking of trade deadline, is going to be who is going to be the left fielder, right? And I don't mean just in terms of like our team. I mean, of course, trades, right? Obviously, you've got Bryce Johnson. You've got Oscar Gonzalez could get called up again, right? You've got Gavin Sheets who plays out there sometimes. There's so many different players that the Padres have been trying out this year, and none very effectively. So I think it's within reason to say, okay, so who are they trading for? Who is going to be the outfielder that they go out and get? Will they go for Bryan Reynolds and shock the world with that trade and put another salary on their books? I don't think they will because of the contract that he has. But will they go for Harrison Bader and say put him in left field? Will they say, you know what? We don't care that he struggled against lefties. Let's go get Jesus Sanchez for the Marlins from nothing. I don't know who it's going to be. But the big thing to keep an eye on is I just don't think that this roster is going to stay the same, particularly when it comes to the lineup. I could see them going out and maybe getting a back end of the rotation pitcher for nothing, right? Like, I don't know who that would be right now. Maybe it's a Heaney or something like that. I don't know. But to me, the bigger thing will be left field. I refuse to believe that post-trade deadline that the Padres lineup, they're just like, yeah, we're just going to continue to try it out. Not just the worst catching tandem in baseball, but also the worst left field tandem in baseball. You can't do both if you want to signal to your fans that you are trying. Now, don't get me wrong, they are trying. I think that if they were unable to do this, it would just be a tragic case of prices were too high, didn't have the assets, etc., etc. But a lot of people, I believe, are going to view it that way. So, what do they do with left field? That is, in my opinion, the single biggest question for the Padres. I think that is a thing they can solve. I do not think catcher can be solved. Well, at least in terms of trades, right? So we'll have to see how that pans out. And with left field, I think that brings up, with the possibility of a trade, my second thing to point out to everybody is, will the Padres keep Ethan Salas? And here's the thing. I'm not saying that Ethan Salas is a beast. Everybody go check out my episode I did with Aram Layton a couple weeks back about the Padres farm system. We talked about like the more depth pieces. We also talked about, in a previous one, we talked about Ethan Salas and Leo Vries. You might be wondering, well, Javi, what about Vries? They could trade him. I don't think Vries is getting traded. There has been no vibe from what I've heard and the just general consensus in the industry that you have all probably read and followed as well, that Leo Vries would be someone that they'd trade. He was already a player that they probably weren't going to trade last year. And all that's happened since then is he's improved, right? At every single aspect of the game, more or less. He turned some heads at spring training a little bit, and he's super young. And now, speaking of Aram Layton, he has him as the third best prospect in all of baseball. And Aram and many others, especially Aram because I know him personally, does not do this lightly. Right? He did not rank Salas as high as everybody else was doing it back in the day, right? He does not rank guys super high. Christian Pache, not to get down a prospect rabbit hole, but I think that trading Ethan Salas would be, in my opinion, a mistake. I really, really don't think they should do that because I just think he has the opportunity to just really solve this catcher problem that we've had for so many years. And I just don't want to be bullish, and I don't think that the Padres fans that have been bullish about trading him because they're like, well, he fell off. He's a 72nd ranked prospect. That's because he got ranked too high to begin with, right? Because everyone was only looking at potential and peripherals and the intangibles and like all these other things. And they didn't pay attention to the fact that he barely was above rookie ball, right? He has all the potential in the world. He's going to be an awesome defensive catcher. I want to hang on to those two guys desperately, but I'm talking about Salas because I actually think he could get moved. The only way Vries gets traded is if it's for a superstar like Jarren Duran, who started balling out towards the end of the first half, but I don't think it's worth it. I really don't. I don't want to trade Leo Vries for basically anybody because we've done that for so many players, and yet we're still on the same path and win total as other teams that don't have the same payroll, that don't have the same level of superstars. So in my opinion, let's accrue a little bit of depth. But if they do trade someone for a big type of piece, I think it would be Ethan Salas. And that's the thing that we're going to have to keep an eye on. I think it's a mistake. I will go on record with that. I am on record for saying that, not that the Soto trade was a mistake when it happened, but it was really, really not what they needed to do. And I was right about that. So we'll see how that pans out, guys. But, ow, hit my finger as I was doing that. Ow, that hurt a lot. I hope that wasn't an omen of something to come. But guys, we are not done talking about the biggest things to keep an eye on in the second half for the Padres. We got to talk about the offense. We got to talk about strength of schedule. Oh yeah, guys, just gonna have to wait a second first though, because we need to take a break to hear from one of our sponsors. And that sponsor, let me tell you folks, it's a lovely one. It is a sensational one. It is the folks over at FanDuel. Let me tell you guys about FanDuel real quick, because with summer sports in full swing, whether you're all about baseball under the bright summer lights, right? You know what I'm saying? Golf on the green, high stakes soccer action, women's basketball, the tennis. There's probably some other things going on that I don't even know about. FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet every day. It is fantastic. It's easy to use. The payout is fast, and it makes even regular season games when the team isn't any good must-watch events, guys. So whether I'm placing the same game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, have no fear. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing into segment number dos. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter, though, /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Make sure to send in your questions because we'll be doing the mailbag. And I'll be in San Diego come July 23rd again. So that should be a lot of fun. So if you have any questions that you want to send me pertaining to that for some reason, you could do that. But anyway, more things to keep an eye on for the Padres in the second half. We just talked about how they will be getting in left field. I'm almost 1,000,000% certain of that. And whether or not Salas gets traded. Something that I don't think should happen. But if there is a big fish that they go after, I believe Salas will be part of that deal. I could be wrong, though. The next thing is very easy, which is, will they get better with runners in scoring position? And I bring this up because the same thing happened last year right? Now, don't get me wrong. They did perform in high leverage situations. But at the All-Star break, you guys might forget that we were really complaining. We were complaining about Bogarts. We were complaining about Cronenworth. We were complaining about, what was it? The Campusano not being any good, right? There was so many different areas in which the Padres are struggling to drive in runs. They weren't very consistent. So do they have a little bit of a second half surge in them? Can Jackson Merrill get better? Can Xander Bogaerts stop being one of the worst players in baseball with runners in scoring position, which we talked about on, Wednesday's episode, I believe. All those sort of things. Will they get better in that regard? And let me tell you, if there's one thing that could speak towards maybe them getting a little bit better in that department, it is another thing to keep an eye on, which is the strength of schedule in the second half. This, according to Fangraphs, remaining strength of schedule, just in terms of what is currently on the list right now, right? Who has the best, who has the hardest remaining schedule, and who has the easiest. The Padres have the 23rd hardest schedule in Major League Baseball in the second half, according to this. Some interesting teams that apparently have it easier than them: the Tigers, Guardians, Pirates, Dodgers, unfortunately, Twins, Royals, and Cubbies. So it could be very interesting. It is interesting that the Giants are 13th in schedule, so maybe some things can open up for them, right? But I think that I'm mentioning this in tangent with the runners in scoring position just to say that they will not be facing necessarily the toughest competition in the world. It's also true, maybe, that I don't know how the graph was fully adjusted for, but it's possible maybe the Rockies are making us, it's throwing off the number a little bit because they're like potentially the worst team in history. But all the same, they have an easy schedule in the second half. And will they be able to make up for that? Will they be able to take advantage, I should say, of that? I don't know, because I think strength of schedule, now for the mask off, I think it could be a little bit of a dumb stat sometimes, a dumb thing to look at. I think it sometimes depends. But in baseball, you just know that teams lose, and you'll see your team, the Padres, could do well against, the Cubs, and then all of a sudden they get swept by the Reds, right? That could happen, and then you could see another team get swept by a good team or a bad team, whatever. So it's just not how it goes. In football, I think it matters a little bit towards the end of the year when we're really figuring out schedules and playoff pictures and all that, and it's like, oh God, can the Bengals make it? They've got to play the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Packers, and that type of stuff matters. But all in all, I'm looking at a team that, I'm not saying they're going to break out and that they are primed to break out more in the second half, but there's certainly evidence to suggest that they can. And that's all that matters, in my opinion. As long as it's possible, this team is going to go for it, and they're going to put their best foot forward, and I'm excited to see it. Another thing to keep an eye on will be Luis Campusano, folks. I know. But it's not just keeping an eye on him in general, it's keeping an eye to see if he gets traded. Because I could see a world in which he gets traded at the deadline. It's the only thing that makes sense to me, right? Like, maybe they're trying to preserve value. I don't know. But if he's someone that gets traded at the deadline, will be interesting. And then, of course, it'll be interesting to see if the Padres go for it and keep playing Martin Maldonado. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe WAR is a horrible thing to look at, right? But I'm going to be curious, because at this rate, Martin Maldonado will be ranked as one of the more poor, like, egregiously bad catchers that has played in Major League Baseball in a while. He's at negative 1.1 wins of replacement. He basically doesn't do anything well. He's not the best framer. He's not throwing out runners. He's letting a lot of pass balls by him, and we know he can't hit. So what happens there, I think, is going to be interesting, and I'm actually curious. I want to look up, like, past 20 years, like, who has had some of the worst catching, and it'll probably be, really bad teams. But in terms of good teams, I don't remember the last time a good team, Padres, 8 games above 500. They're a good team. Maybe not great, but good. I don't remember a last time, like, a good contending team had this bad of a catching issue, and still, like, being okay despite it. So maybe there is something to be said for them not wanting to put in Campusano because they want to make sure the pitching doesn't suffer. I think that's a little bit of an old-fashioned thing, but we'll see. Keeping an eye on whether Campusano gets more time. I don't know if it matters. Maybe he gets traded, but that's still something to keep an eye on. Another thing, and I think that these are this will really determine how hard they go at the deadline in a lot of ways, in terms of not just what degree of player they get, but also what kind of player they get. Because depending on certain injuries, depending on the health of certain players, if the Padres rotation is healthy, I don't think they go that crazy at the deadline for a pitcher. Maybe they go and just pick up some guy the way they did last year with Martin Perez. I don't know who the guy would be right now, but just some guy that you're like, okay, he could throw innings. Maybe we'll bring him in if we want to. Maybe we like them a little bit better than Berger and Randy and Kulik and maybe Brian Hoeing if he gets another starting opportunity. Whatever it is, right? I could see that. But all in all, the return of the King is the biggest thing next to the left field to keep an eye on for the next foreseeable couple weeks, right? Because with Michael King back, if he doesn't come back, and he laughed the other day, right? When they talked about his bobblehead, he was like, "Oh please, not we gotta." To paraphrase, he's like, "We can't make it, on August 20th." If that is true, which we don't know because the Padres are very cagey historically about their injuries, especially with pitching. And frankly, position players too. You guys remember when they were like, "Yeah, Jake Cronenworth's fine," and then he immediately was placed on the IL for 2 weeks, whatever it was. It was amazing. I think that with this Padres team, if Michael King comes back, if Yu Darvish comes back, I'm curious to see how they feel about it. Because if you see them trade for a pitcher, then that tells you they don't feel great about these guys' health, especially the latter, in my opinion, in Darvish. I don't know what we're getting out of Darvish, and that's the next thing. Can he stay healthy? And even if he can stay healthy, this guy's old, man. He's real, real old. And when you look at his overall numbers, he is actually aging quite well, Yu Darvish. So we were right about that when he signed that contract in 2023. We were right that Darvish has aged okay, right? Last year, he was 3.31 ERA. Yeah, his FIP was a little bit higher at 4, but for a guy who's 37, that's not bad, and he's delivering. And I think the big thing about him, he's a presence, clearly, from what I've heard. He's great for younger pitchers, I think. Just a great mind of the game. And lastly, if you need a playoff start, I think Yu Darvish could go out there and be awesome. I really do. I really, really do. I would not be surprised if Yu Darvish, that's his biggest value at this point, is that he can go out there. Yes, he could throw innings and be okay potentially, but if he goes out there and is awesome in a playoff start, it will surprise nobody because he was awesome last year, right? I think that's why they're we gotta hope that he's healthy, but we'll see. We'll see. And also, in fairness, it is fair to be you know what I mean? I'm just throwing together words, but will he even be just good, right? So far in a couple starts, he's walking a whole lot of batters. It hasn't looked great for him, right? But still, I think that it could get better. I think he could get some strikeouts and be a decent pitcher. But those two guys, really got to see how the health keeps. Because, man, this rotation, it's doing its best, man. But still, it's still going to be a question whether or not they're able to hold together the whole way. I'm like Han Solo in A New Hope, right? Oh, please, baby, hold together. But folks, we're not done yet talking about things to keep an eye on for the second half for the Padres. We've got a few more things to talk about, but first, a word from our sponsors. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing as always. Remember to go follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Look, here we are. We are in the second half, and I think that, as I was talking about with the pitching, I think if you there's a way to simplify this video and be like, all right, what are we going to do with left field? Will the pitching hold up? Will we trade for anyone big? Those are really the biggest storylines. But to dive deeper into it, right, we just talked about Yu Darvish and Michael King. Those guys' health is huge. Because if those guys are healthy, Michael King, Dylan Cease, Nick Pivetta, Yu Darvish, it's fine. It's fine. I don't know, I won't feel amazing come playoff time because then the pressure on Darvish at 38 years old gets higher because we just keep seeing that Dylan Cease is a mess and has not been able. There's a possibility that Dylan Cease's value for the rest of the season is just that, he's a starting pitcher who could sometimes have good starts. You know what I mean? But not someone that we're this guy's actively going to put us above the other contending teams. He's just going to be a piece, if that makes sense. He's just having such an off year. I don't know if it's going to change. But with this rotation, it's also worth keeping an eye on. And this was the thing that we were all wondering heading into the season. And I was really excited about it. But I still think the battle for the 5th spot is interesting to watch because two things. Number one, Randy Vasquez, right? Randy Vasquez has been exceptional so far this year in terms of his ERA. But we all have been seeing the data, right? And the data suggests that he is getting abnormally lucky, right? He gives up a lot of hard hit stuff. He doesn't necessarily generate a ground ball rate. He walks more batters than he strikes out. The only thing that he's good is he does limit hard contact to a degree. It's just that he doesn't put it on the ground and he puts it a lot in the air. So eventually this guy likely, not for sure, maybe he's just doing some devil magic and he might luck through the rest of the season, probably going to regress at some point. And when that happens, I wonder, could he be moved to the bullpen? And if he's moved to the bullpen, does that mean that potentially the Padres are going to be more bullish on trading one of their relievers? Another thing I want to point out there, if the Padres were to go for a big player, I think it would be a combination of Ethan Salas, and maybe Boston Bateman, Cobb Hightower, and I'm wondering if a reliever is part of it, because the bullpen has been so good that I doubt the Padres are going to want to trade from one of their strengths. But if it's for a really good player, I think you could see, a Jason Adam get moved. I think you could see that happen. It's unlikely, but it is something that I think they need to entertain and be like, okay, maybe we just move someone in. We've got guys in there. We have Tyson Neighbors down in the minors. He could come up. We have Alec Jacob. We have guys that could potentially come up and be pretty good players. That good? I don't know. But they could still be pretty solid. I personally would not do that because I still worry a little bit about Suarez, right? He's another thing to keep an eye on. He's been good, but you saw what happened at the MLB All-Star Game, which, by the way, really funny that Dave Roberts just happened to want to use all three Padres relievers. Took out, you know what I mean? I was just like, really? Not to get all conspiratorial, but I did have a little bit of, itching my chin and being like, what's going on here? What's he building in there? So yeah, that's the thing to keep an eye on. But the battle for the fifth spot is even bigger. It's too early, but I think Ryan Berger, friend of the show, I'm intrigued to see what happens here. I'm intrigued because Kolek, I might have just been dead wrong about, right? Like Kolek, and they sent him down. I don't know what it was, but I thought the stuff was better. But unlike Randy Vasquez, he did not catch the breaks, right? So maybe you're only allowed one pitcher in your rotation to get a little bit lucky. Because what I liked about him is that he did not put the ball in the air at all. And I like that. But the whiff rate, the strikeouts, the walks, it just wasn't all that great, right? His strikeout rate wasn't high enough to justify him. And he was still getting hit pretty hard, right? Yes, you're putting it on the ground, but you're still allowing a lot of hard hit stuff. So I do think that he's a little bit better than what his overall numbers suggest. But Kolek, I was wrong about, it looks like. Then you've got our man, Ryan Berger, who I am intrigued by because his fastball is playing. That's my big thing with him. He still has the same issues that all three of these guys have, which is that they could give up hard contact. It's not great, right? Their expected stats aren't great. I get that. But I do like that his fastball has been really good despite not being a pitch that has a high velo, right? Opponents are only hitting 143 against his fastball. It tops out about 94 miles per hour or so, 93.7 on average. I'm intrigued by it. And his other peripherals aren't too bad either, right? His slider has been pretty effective. I'm intrigued. The slider has also a 30% whiff rate. I am intrigued by Ryan Berger, and maybe this is because his last start was especially really good when he struck out 7. But I just think that that's a guy to keep an eye on. In general, keep an eye on that fifth spot, only for depth reasons. I don't think that it's going to be the reason the Padres are falling apart, but still, it's a thing to keep an eye on. The next thing, and dare I say last thing, is Jackson Merrill. We talked about him, what was it, last week? Did we talk about him last week or this week? What was it? I forgot. When did we talk about Jackson Merrill? Probably last week. He's been kind of not great in the first half. He is whiffing, and one of the things that we knew about Jackson Merrill was the power was going to be a problem. So I'm not surprised that given that as a prospect, everyone was like, it's going to take time for him to, break into that power. 7 home runs in 64 games, not great, but more importantly, a .416 slugging, not great. But that's not shocking me. What's shocking me is that Jackson Merrill has been whiffing through stuff, right? I expected that maybe the power wouldn't come in this year. I did. I talked about this before the season. But the fact that he's whiffing and striking out more on stuff, I think that's something to keep an eye on. Can he break out in the second half? Can he fix whatever was in his way before? I think a lot of it, because the quality of contact is still pretty good, right? Not amazing, but still pretty good. And he's actually walking more this year, which is, I think, a huge factor that we have not talked about nearly as much as we should on this show, right? Like, he's walking more. He's at an 8.5% walk rate. That is in the 51st percentile in baseball, as opposed to last year, a 4.9% walk rate, which was in the 8th percentile in baseball. So he has regressed with his ability to make contact, the bat-to-ball skills, and his power, but he has improved with the walk rate. That, in terms of long-term, makes me more excited about Jackson Merrill. I know that sounds weird. I know. But I don't think him whiffing through pitches, right? I don't think the chase rate and the whiff rate and the K rate, I don't think that's going to stick, right? I think eventually that will get back to regular. The power, I could see maybe potentially taking some time, but it's really cool to me that he's walking more. I love that from Jackson Merrill. But in general, we got to keep an eye out. What is he going to do in the second half? Because if he can be just 60%, 50%, honestly, heck, 40% of what he was last year, let's say 60% again, I changed my mind. Let's say if he's 60, 70% of what he was last year, I know I'm throwing out too many percentages, but stick with me. That's going to be huge for this team. Just knowing that you don't have a bad player there anymore, which he has been for a while now, offensively, that's going to be huge for this team, right? Because you need some guys to step up. I think Tatis might. He's someone to keep an eye on for, but I don't know. I just think that I think he's going to figure it out. I'm a little bit more optimistic. Not necessarily with Mr. Jackson Merrill. So we'll have to see with him. But in general, guys, look, it's been a really pretty good season so far, in all honesty. The total stats, they're 6th in ERA. They're 8th in home runs allowed. They're 10th in whip. They are 3rd in batting average against. And there's some hope here. I mean, and on base percentage, they're 18th. You could get a little bit better there. It's the offense. It's all offense. So can guys like Merrill, can guys like Tatis, can Manny keep it up? If those guys play like stars, the depth issues are not going to matter nearly as much. But still, those are, and it's been a lot of mumbo jumbo on this podcast, guys, but those are the things to keep an eye on for the second half for the Padres. Let me know what else you are keeping an eye on in the second half. I also think Nunez, the new relief pitcher, that's another one to keep an eye on. I think in the second half, maybe, again, could make those relievers more expendable in a trade. But we'll see what happens, guys. But until next time, Monday's show. Remember to send me in your questions, as many as you like, at Javapeno on Twitter /X, JAVIIPENO, and Blue Sky. And also, leave some comments in the YouTube. I will pull them up and start reading them on Saturday and Sunday. But until that next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friday Faithful homies, have a lovely Friday and weekend. Take care.